Well, after a manic Monday, we begin with what could be a tremendous Tuesday for Herman Cain as the embattled presidential candidate comes off his biggest fundraising day ever while in the throes of damage control over a sexual harassment story. Now, Cain kicked off the week with rolling disclosures about reports, now confirmed by NBC News, that two of Cain's female staffers accused him of harassment and received cash payouts from the National Restaurant Association. And while the fact of such charges is serious enough, it's Cain's handling of the allegations that is drawing the sharpest criticism.
Herman Cain made a fool of himself yesterday, made it up as he went along.
But Cain just keeps talking, offering his latest version earlier today on cable network HLN. Take a listen.
As I recalled what happened 12 years ago, I recalled an agreement. I wasn't thinking legal settlement. And so the words have been flyspecked, and I do recall an agreement.
Okay, so now Cain does recall an agreement after saying repeatedly last night that he did not recall much of anything to Fox's Greta Van Susteren.
I can't recall. I really can't recall. Haven't been able to recall a lot of them. I don't recall. Nope. I can't recall. I don't recall that. I don't recall. And I don't recall. I can't recall which one came first. I don't recall Greta. Can't recall. I don't recall signing it. I don't recall having a private conversation with her. The fact that I say I don't recall signing it doesn't mean that I didn't sign it, but I simply don't recall if I signed it.
And there were more than that, actually. Cain continues to contradict himself, even doing so without the context of single interviews, doing within the context of those interviews. But conservatives are jumping to Cain's defense, arguing that the whole dust-up is part of a process to tear down a black Republican.
Liberals detest conservative blacks. If you are a conservative black, they will believe the most horrible sexualized fantasies of these uptight white women feminists.
All right, let's bring in Christina Bellantoni of Roll Call. She's at Harvard University this afternoon. Christina, thank you for stopping by. And, you know, it wasn't just her. Many prominent conservatives rallied around Cain, calling this a high-tech lynching, evoking the case of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. The question is, will it work, though, in this case?
Well, I think that, first of all, voters don't decide based on what pundits say or what you or I say. There have certainly been candidacies that have ended over less than this and candidacies that have continued on to the presidency over far more than this. So there are a lot of things that Cain has to be thinking about this week. Without question, he did not handle it very well. I mean, that clip that you just played with the saying he didn't recall.
20-plus times he says he did not recall, Christina.
Exactly. Exactly. And when you use he's very carefully choosing his words. You've seen some of this legalese, but then changing the story. I mean, it's not a good week for him. But at the same time, a lot of conservative Republican primary voters don't like to see a candidate, dragged onto the headlines on the television, and they might rally to his defense. I mean, we're in a day and age where you can raise a lot of money off a gaffe or something that's pretty controversial. So I wouldn't be surprised if his supporters are opening their wallets a little bit more this week.
And conservatives are raising the idea, evoking the idea here of racism, but doesn't this fly in the face of what Cain has said in the past, that race was not an issue in this campaign?
Well, I mean, anybody can say that. Barack Obama said that at times in the campaign as well. I mean, he is a black candidate running for president. You can't ignore that fact. But I wouldn't say that a lot of people are really framing this that way. I think that the facts, do certainly speak for themselves in a lot of these cases. We don't know every single detail, but obviously independent news outlets have been confirming, what broke over the weekend, that his campaign said was completely untrue. And now he's having to walk that back and change his story. So it doesn't look good for him. But again,
doesn't
it's
look
really
good
all
here,
about
Christina. So then the question is, as we see these shoes drop, when will be the last one? When will Limbaugh, when will Laura Ingraham, Karl Rove, and all the rest say, okay, no more free passes? And for that matter, what about the other candidates? As of today, Perry was asked about it at an event. He stayed away from the entire issue. Huntsman was asked about it. He did allude to that there are distractions in campaigns. When do they jump in and take advantage of this, if they do at all?
Well, I think that's just a tricky issue. When you cut to primary campaigns, a lot of times candidates would prefer that their rivals end their own candidacies or, end up doing something that trips themselves up. They don't want to take part in it, at least openly. But certainly the people that are watching him be the front runner in the Republican primary aren't happy with him, so they're probably not too sad that he's taking a bit of a tumble. But I think also all of these candidates know that it could be them at any point to have their name, have a really bad week like this. So it's really a matter of what the voters are going to be saying in about 2 months.
What do you make of this? He made fairly clear contradictions in his interview with Greta Van Susteren on Fox last night. I'm sure you've listened to it, saying he didn't know anything about the settlement. Then he put a dollar amount at 3 months' salary. Is this something like what former RNC Chairman Michael Steele said earlier today? He said it's similar to Watergate, where the cover-up is getting bigger than the alleged wrongdoing.
Wow. I would not necessarily compare it to Watergate in this instance. We don't know the exact details of the situation, but it doesn't look good. And certainly the fact that he changed his story doesn't help. But in the end, voters are evaluating candidates based on the entire picture. Do I think that Cain is less likely to be the Republican presidential nominee today than he was on Saturday? Definitely. But there's a lot of time between now and the time that voters in Iowa go to the caucuses, and I think that a lot of things can change.
Okay, what do you think of this? Because if we put this aside for a second, brewing in the background a potentially large wave with some legal implications for his campaign's operations, there's the group Americans for Prosperity that was run by the billionaire Koch brothers, which we're both familiar with. Mark Block ran one of its state chapters. He also ran Prosperity USA. That's a Wisconsin corporation. He now is the Cain campaign's chief of staff. Now, the question is about an alleged $40,000 owed from the campaign to Prosperity USA and whether there are certain illegal donations that are made there. How big of a deal could that become?
Oh, that absolutely could be a big deal, and I'll give a little shout out to Roll Call's David Drucker, who had been writing multiple stories about what Cain's staff was really like, and that many of them hailed from Wisconsin and some of his Wisconsin ties. And he does have an unusual campaign structure, not to mention the fact he's not really running the same kind of campaign the other primary candidates are running. He's not spending a lot of time in Iowa or New Hampshire. He's going nationally. He's doing this book tour. So those are the real questions that voters are going to need to evaluate, and in many cases they have evaluated them, and he's still topping the polls of this field right now. But I think that when it really comes down to it, voters are going to be looking at that, hey, I'm an Iowan, I haven't actually met this person to be able to ask more specifics about whatever plans I'm interested in, so maybe I'm not going to actually go caucus for him. So I think that those issues could definitely become a bigger deal.
All right, some tough times for his campaign, perhaps, but he's still making a lot of money, $250,000. Again, that record day that we started out by talking about. Christina Bellantoni, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Coming